place because I don't have.
Okay. So change your place while I'm introducing you. Okay. Okay. While Nikola is managing his connection, I will take an opportunity. I will seize an opportunity to introduce him. Nikola is doing a PhD in sociology at one of the most prestigious universities in France, research university, which is called the Practical School of Advanced Studies. And his subject matter is state-church relations in post-Soviet countries. And he's dealing with church affairs in Ukraine in particular, from the perspective of geopolitical conflicts. But today, Nikola is going to talk about upcoming presidential elections in France. It's also an exciting subject, lots of discussions, lots of ideological clashes, and even some wild cards taking place in this political process. So this presidential election is definitely not going to be ordinary.
Yeah. Sorry for my little delay. Can you hear me well now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So thank you, Pablo, for these introductions. As Pablo said, I'm talking about the Orthodox schism in Ukraine because I have two specializations. I graduated from the Institute of Political Sciences in Aix-en-Provence, then from the École pratique des études, where I graduated in Master 2 of Religious Studies. So I'm trying to understand what are the links between politics and religious affairs, especially in the Slavic countries. As I lived in Moscow, I wrote a first thesis about the state-church relations in post-Soviet Russia, and now I'm currently working about Ukraine. But I would like today to speak more with you about what are the main issues which are currently going in France about the French presidential elections, which are going to occur next year. So I have a presentation to show you. Okay, I will share my screen if I can. Pablo, could you let me share my screen in order to show my... Okay. Can you hear me, Pablo?
Just a sec. Андрію, можете поділитися екраном? Андрію, ви керуєте сесією, поділіться екраном, будь ласка.
Там є опція multiply. Там де share screen.
Андрію, можете?
Так.
Just a sec.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, great.
Great, thank you. Okay, so from the beginning. Okay. Do you see the full screen? Yeah?
Yeah, we can see it perfectly well.
I will just move this. Okay. Okay, so I would like to speak about the French presidential elections from a socio-political analysis. What are the main issues? What could I say from an historical, sociological, and political perspective about our French presidential elections? So that's why I would like to introduce my subject. First of all, we have to know that what are the main characteristics, the social, historical, and legal characteristics of the presidential race in France? We have to know that France is a unitary bicameral law republic system. That is to know that what does it mean, bicameral? It means that you have two parliamentary chambers who are voting law. And so this system is called the Fifth French Republic. The presidential race is particularly important since Charles de Gaulle, as you can know, changed the rules so that the president is directly elected by the people, because until so far, the president was elected by the parliament and not by people. So through a referendum organized in 1962. But what can we see? What can we notice is that we have a trend increase in electoral abstention and political disenchantment of people. So that's why I have spoken about three main concepts. The first one is electoral distancing. The second one is fluidity of voting behavior. And the third one is undifferentiated political offer. So the first question would be, is there an electoral distancing vis-à-vis the French presidential elections? From an historical perspective, this is very important to know that, for instance, Alexis Tocqueville, in his memoirs, wrote that elections by universal suffrage in 1848 aroused such enthusiasm that even the infirm and sick people were driven by horses to the polling station in order to make them able to vote. But as you can notice, not only in France, but in some European countries, this enthusiasm seems nowadays to have disappeared. So that's why we are going to think about the reasons of this electoral distancing. Why do people are going away from the political elections? Is it the same thing as regards the presidential elections, the local elections, the regional elections, the low elections? Because for instance, we will see that as regards the presidential elections, this is the biggest and the most important issues for the French people. So what are the main reasons of this non-participation of citizens? Because as you can see, we could define the electoral distancing as a voluntary non-participation of the citizens by casting not a ballot in any political race, implying an electoral vote. So there are many reasons which were studied by political sciences. There is a feeling of powerlessness in the face of a political offer which doesn't fit with the expectation of the voters of the French people. Also a lack of interest in politics. But also there are some other reasons that we could
Та, друзі, як я розумію, в нашого доповідача складнощі з інтернетом. Я сподіваюся, він зараз повернеться. Я йому напишу.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Great, yeah.
So I was saying, could you tell me where I was stopped, please?
Well, you were making comments upon the slide, beginning with the Tocqueville comments, and then contrasting it with the present situation when there is a lack of interest in voting.
Okay, great.
On part of voters.
Okay, great. So I was talking about three very main important concepts. The first one is electoral distancing, as I said. The second one is fluidity of voting behavior. And the third one is undifferentiated political offer. So I'm going to tell you what it concerns, what is it about. So from an historical perspective, this is very important to know that Alexis Tocqueville, for instance, in his memoirs wrote that elections by universal suffrage in 1848 aroused such enthusiasm that even the infirm and sick people were driven by horses to go to the polling station in order to make them able to vote. So this is very interesting because nowadays people don't really want to use this right to vote. And this enthusiasm seems nowadays to have disappeared, especially in our democracies and especially in Europe and in France. So, but it will be very interesting to know if this is how can I say, this electoral distancing is there not only in local elections, but also about the presidential elections. So there are many reasons which are discussed by political scientists. For instance, a feeling of powerlessness, that is to know that the voters consider that the political offer which exists doesn't fit with their expectation. Also, lack of interest in politics. It will be very interesting also to think about a kind of counter effect of what we call coach all parties concept. What is that? The political scientists thought about this concept, and what is it? The coach all parties, this is the idea that all the traditional parties are more or less the same. That is to know that all of their programs seem to be more and more, how can I say, the same thing. That is to know that they are, for instance, in the left wing and the right wing, they are all in favor of all social changes. For instance, as regards the right of abortion and so on, but also from an economic perspective, they are more or less liberal. That is to know, they accepted the idea that we are living in a world where there is the market, the rule of demand and offer, and that is to know that they do accept all of these liberal concepts from an economic perspective. So why do I say such a thing? This is because there are some new issues which seems to be very important for people, and the traditional parties seem to not be able to fit with these expectations. So this is the first idea. The second idea is to say that we have a new phenomenon. This is the moyennisation phenomenon. I could not translate this word because this is a specific situation in France. I will speak more about this concept. What does it mean? But what can I say about this is that we have a traditional separation between working classes, what we call low classes, and upper classes. Could you please just because there is somebody who was with.
Вимкніть, будь ласка, всі мікрофони. Андрію, повимикайте всіх. Тут, от і Василець, мікрофон. Вимкніть. Ольга, Василець.
Thank you. So then I wanted to show you that, for instance, a comparative overview of electoral distancing in France. As you can see, about the legislative elections, you have a big abstention trend. This is obvious when you look at the first graphic. You can see that for the last legislative elections, you have more than 51% of the French people who didn't go to the polling, to the elections in order to vote and to participate to these legislative elections. This is the same thing for local elections, what we call a municipal. As you can see, there is an historical record in the last year. You have more than 55% of the people who didn't go to vote for the local elections. So this is very interesting because you have a lack of interest in politics among the French people, especially as regards the legislative elections and also the local elections. This is very surprising because you can, one of the main reasons which are said by people in their lack of interest is that they feel that the people who are in the political affairs, they seem to be away from the reality of what people of the lives of people each day. I mean, like they feel that they are just living in a separate world. They are not living with what they know each day through their work, through the education, and so on. But here, as you can see, as regards the local elections, you can see that there is a very big abstention. So this is interesting to see that some of the reasons which are said by people are not showing something real in the election trends. As regards the presidential, elections, you can see that this abstention is not very, very high. You can see that there is a kind of trend which seems to see that there is a kind of increase of this abstention, but it seems to be more or less stable, as it is not the case for the legislative elections, for the local elections, and for sure for the European elections, where there is the biggest rate of abstention, which can be understood as a kind of skepticism towards the European institutions, especially in Europe and also in some Eastern countries, as you can see here the abstention for the presidential elections. You have only 21% of people who didn't vote to the presidential elections in 2000. What does it say? The fact that this phenomenon of abstention does not concern the presidential elections. What is the main reason? So I guess that there are some sociological reasons. The first one is that the presidential function remains a big issue in France. First of all, there is a law aspect of this issue, the presidential issue. Because of our semi-presidential regime, the presidential function is considered as the biggest political issue for the French people. As you can see, Maurice Duverger, who is a very well-known lawyer and professor of law, he has already passed, spoke about a republican monarchy to describe our Fifth Republic. Because why did he say such a thing? This is because Charles de Gaulle, when he came to the power at the office of the presidential office in France, he wanted to, how could I say, to set a kind of monarchy, a republican monarchy. So that's why there are some lawyers, as Maurice Duverger, who were saying that we are in a republican monarchy. But anyway, the power of the president remains framed by the law and the parliament. As we had constitutional revisions in 2008, and because we wanted to frame the power of the president, because the president, even we can say for sure that in our French constitution, the president has a lot of powers for sure, but these powers remains limited, restricted by the fact that the parliament has some power, legislative power, thanks to these revisions in 2008. So there is another phenomenon which could I describe as the fluidity of voting behaviors in France. Historically, there is a strong link between belonging to a social class and voting behavior. That is to know that if you belong to a working class, you are more or less going to vote for the left. If you belong to the upper class, you are more or less going to vote for the right. So the well-known sociologist Pierre Bourdieu, as you can know, wrote specifically about the impact of social structures on these voting behaviors. For sure, when Pierre Bourdieu was speaking about these voting behaviors, he was not just considering, how can I say, the revenue. I mean, like, he was not just considering the income of people, but also what he said, the capital culturel, that is to know the cultural capital, which means that when, for instance, you were educated in an upper class, you have more means to get an upper education. Okay, so that's why there is a link between social classes, economic classes, and also your education opportunities. So Pierre Bourdieu spoke about this, and that's why he was considering that if you're, you can be, how can I say, you can belong to a kind of intermediate class, but as you have a big cultural capital, you are more or less going to vote in the left. So there is, for instance, a dualistic index of class voting, which was elaborated by a sociologist, Robert Alford, in 1943. And so this is a very interesting way to understand the differences in voting behaviors between workers and non-workers, especially for the left. Because as I said, traditionally, the popular classes, that is to say, the working classes vote on the left. But this index is considered as being archaic nowadays by political scientists because of this moyennisation phenomenon, which is occurring in France. Okay, because we have a change, that is to say, from an industrial society, which is based on manufacturing, to a post-industrial society, that is to know that we have services which can bring more wealth than manufacturing products. Okay, so this is this index about precisely this difference between about behavior as you can see, you have workers who were voting for the left, and you can see that this trend decreases from 1945 to 1990. You can see that it's going to decrease. So it means that left wing as, how can I say, as loosened sorry, that's okay.
Sorry.
So I was saying, that's okay. So I was saying that, as you can see, you have a decreasing trend. That is to say that workers are not going to, are not likely to vote for the left now. And you can see it especially now because, for instance, the working classes are more or less likely to vote for Marine Le Pen, for instance. Marine Le Pen, as you can know, is a far-right candidate. She is the president of a national party in France, whose name is Rassemblement National. Was formal name of this party was Front National. And so this is also interesting to know why did she change the name of her party? Because she wanted to stay away from what her father, who is the creator, the founder of this party, she wanted to stay away from his political ideas. That is to know that Marine Le Pen considered that the ideas of her father were too strict, too radical, and she wanted to appear in the political offer as being normal and classical. But I will speak more about this a bit later. Then, so what is the moyennisation phenomenon, which could explain this fluidity in electoral behaviors? So the evolution of the society is a trend towards what I described, this fluidity electoral behaviors. The French society is characterized now by a moyennisation phenomenon. This is very important to know why we can't translate this word, because the classe moyenne in 70s was not an equivalent word as a middle class in English, because this concept of classe moyenne was deeply linked with average income, which is not the case in the middle class term in English, which is more or less linked not only with average income, but also with cultural capital, with also a kind of social prestige. Okay, so what kind of word in English we could use to describe this phenomenon in France? This is a kind of averagization. this is not a very beautiful term, but it means that you have a gradual increase in income, not only in income, but also the emergence in France of an intermediate class. This phenomenon is known to be not a new phenomenon because it appeared after the Second World War, because we had what we say the big the boomers generation. This is all the people who were born after the Second World War, and so they could they were the main people who how can I say, they had a very big increase. How can I? Oh, sorry. So their economic situation was more and more better than in the past. So this is the idea that from the ends of the Second World War, you have a big boost in the economic growth in France. Economical growth in France. So the idea also what are what could we think about especially the main issues of the French presidential elections. So as you can imagine, as we had to go through the pandemic situation with coronavirus, the health issues are the most important issue for the French people. As you can see, more than 85% of the people consider that the health issues is the main issue for these French presidential elections. The second one is also the struggle against this pandemic situation of coronavirus. Then you have the education, and then you can see that you have the security issues and the struggle against terrorism. Okay, so it seems that okay, you have the health issues, but you have also a big part of the French population which consider that the struggle against terrorism is an important issue. Okay, so we are going to speak a little bit about this priority for the French people, because it has a lot of effect on the French presidential elections. So as you can imagine, you have in France a rise of the far-right parties. I should not say far-right parties, it's more a far-right trend in political race in France. Why? If health issues remain a major, important subject, a topic in France, are considered also as important issues, the struggle against terrorism and also the security issues. You have a new phenomenon which appeared in France since 2017. This is the emergence of outsiders, actors, political actors, who are disrupting the traditional political offer. That is to know how can we define the traditional political offer? That is to know the traditional historical parties which had the power in France. Okay, as you can know, in 2017, you had the French president Emmanuel Macron, and he was especially an outsider. For sure, he's not in the far right wing, sure, but he was not supported by any traditional party when he won this election. He has created his party, whose name is La République en Marche, but this is very important to know that French people were going away from what offer the traditional parties. That is to know, you have in the left the Socialist Party, Parti Socialiste. In the right, you had les Républicains, Republicans. Okay, so what you will understand why I'm speaking about the outsiders, because it also concerns the far-right trend. Especially, you have a new phenomenon during these elections in France. This is the Zemmour phenomenon, which could be defined more or less as the French Trump or French Trump candidate. Why? Who is Éric Zemmour? Éric Zemmour is a well-known former journalist of Le Figaro. This is a French journal. And this candidate, currently not official because he has not announced his candidacy for the presidential election in France, while we know that he's going for sure to participate in these elections. He is known for his far-right and radical ideas and positions, especially about immigration, security issues, and his favorite theme, the grand remplacement. What is this expression? This expression is coming from a far-right writer whose name is Renaud Camus. So the idea is to say that, which is now very popular in the far-right wing, this is the idea that because of immigration in France, you have a native French population, which is going to be changed by a new population coming from Maghreb, coming from the north of Africa. Okay, and so this is a big how can I say, fear for the far right wing, because they consider this phenomenon as being real. And this expression was considered until so far as being very not, how can I say, this expression was not used in the political system, but now, for instance, during the last debate for choosing the new candidate for the traditional party, Les Républicains in the right, the journalist spoke about this expression, grand remplacement, to know what is the positions of all of these candidates about this expression. It doesn't mean that this is not because they are speaking about an expression which is used by some political candidates, that it means that this is going to be real. Okay, this is very important to know that all of these expressions are used from a symbolic perspective by these candidates. I'm not saying that they don't believe in that, but they use it as a way for them to get some votes from people who are afraid of this phenomenon. Okay, so immigration issues are considered as a large priority for this candidate, Éric Zemmour. He is an outsider. That's why I was speaking about outsiders, because he is not supported by any traditional party and could go by the way to the second round against Emmanuel Macron, which is very, very interesting, because he is a competitor of Marine Le Pen. You could say, but they have probably the same ideas. That's right. They could be considered as two candidates from the far right wing. Yes, that's true. But Éric Zemmour is going more far. Is going far. If we consider what does he say and what Marine Le Pen says. Okay, that is to say that he's more radical in his positions. He speaks very freely, very directly. He doesn't use any filters to speak about his ideas, about immigration and so on. And it seems that this very direct speech can bring some people who are disappointed because of or disappointed from the national party of Marine Le Pen, Front National. Okay, so this is very interesting, this candidacy, because it reveals this is a kind of sign of a weakening of the traditional parties which existed in France. While they still exist, you have, so in the left, as I said, the Parti Socialiste. In the right, you have Les Républicains, but also of the party of Marine Le Pen, which was not considered as being a participant in this traditional political offer. They were considered as being not, how can I say, classical. But now it seems that Marine Le Pen can lose a lot of voters who are disappointed about this phenomenon of normalization of her speech, because she wants to make acceptable her party. Okay. So as you can see, this trend is very, very interesting, because you can see that you have, so Eric Zemmour, he had only 10% in September, and now you can see he has more than 17% in the end of October. And then you can see also that you have Marine Le Pen. She had, for instance, in May 28, and now she has more or less 16, 15. So this is very interesting, because Eric Zemmour seems to be the most, how can I say, he seems to be the most likely candidate who is going to be in the second round for the presidential French elections. Okay, you have also Emmanuel Macron, for sure, who is going probably to win this election. So where does this political fluidity come from? As I said, there is a lack of interest in and disappointment in traditional partisan structure. That's why you have some outsider candidates who appear in the political offer in France. You have also a fragmented right party, which cannot find its candidate. For instance, Les Républicains, they have still not found their candidate for the French presidential elections, while it is going to be in the next year. And you have also a divided left wing. You have several candidates who are going to be in the French presidential elections. You have, like in the left wing, you have a socialist party. So the very historical party, Parti Socialiste, whose name is Parti Socialiste. It was very weakened since its failure in 2017. Like in the last French presidential elections. And as regards the far right wing, you have this kind of failure of the normalizations of the speech of Marine Le Pen. This is a kind of catch-all parties. That it means that she wants to bring more people in her party. That's why she wants to be considered as being acceptable towards all the people. So that's why she normalized her speech, okay? And so because of this normalization of her speech, she disappointed many of her voters. So that's why many voters who were in the for Marine Le Pen, so they are now going to vote for Eric Zemmour, because he has, we can say that, for instance, Eric Zemmour has the ideas of Jean-Marie Le Pen, that is to say, the father of Marine Le Pen, who was, as I said, the founder of the Front National party. So that's why you can see that you have the emergence of some outsider candidates who are going to disrupt the political traditional system in France. Also, you have some ideas about who is going to vote in these elections. So you can see that more than 16% of the people are going to vote for Marine Le Pen. Among them, you can see there is a big part of them who have less than 35. You can see also that you have some, how can I say, popular or working classes who are going to vote for her, more than 29% of them. And also you can see, this is very interesting, as regards the Eric Zemmour candidacy, you can see that the pensioners are more likely to vote for Eric Zemmour than Marine Le Pen, because as you can see, more than 17% of the pensioner would like to vote for Eric Zemmour, while there is only trend. So what is my conclusion? My conclusion is to say that Emmanuel Macron seems to be the most suitable candidate to win this election. In all cases, if Marine Le Pen or Eric Zemmour is selected in the second round, Emmanuel Macron is the most likely candidate to win this election. Why? Because there is an historical idea in the political sphere, which is what they call the Front Républicain. That is to say, against the far right trend, you have some people from the right, from the left, who are going to be together against the far right trend. That's why these people are more inclined to vote for Emmanuel Macron than for Eric Zemmour or Marine Le Pen. But this trend is more or less going to disappear, because we have seen that, for instance, as regards the local elections, the regional elections, you had some candidates in the left who lose at the first round, and they didn't want to vote for some traditional candidates to in their oppositions against the far right trend. They wanted to say that this is not because there is a far right trend that, as being a left people, they have to vote for some official, traditional, historical candidates who are precisely against the far right trend. I mean, like, for instance, you had some situations in which you had a candidate from the traditional party, right party, Les Républicains, and you had a candidate from the Front National, Rassemblement National, that is to say, the party of Marine Le Pen. And so people who were in the left, they were invited to vote for the candidate of Les Républicains, because the idea was to say, we are going to be opposed to struggle against this far right trend. But some of these people who were voting for the left didn't want to vote for the candidate, the candidate of Les Républicains. So that's why it's going to be more or less complicated, because this Front Républicain is weakening now. So I think it will be very interesting to see what will be the position of, because as you can know, Emmanuel Macron is not considered as being a president from the left wing. So it will be very interesting to see what will be the vote, or the people who are in the left, are they going to vote for Emmanuel Macron or not, to struggle against this far right trend. But what are my conclusions? My conclusion is to say that we can see what we say in French, a droitisation of the French people. That is to say, you have a kind of trend towards the right wing in France because of some of these issues. There is no the security issues, immigration issues, which are considered as being more and more important for some French people. Also, for sure, as you have noticed, there is also the health issues, but this is important to know how this, how can I say, this civilizational aspect seems to be more or less important in the political debates. So I think that it will be very interesting to know what will be the next step in these elections, because some of these candidates are still not officially declared, announced, but I think that the trend is in favor of Emmanuel Macron, while you can see that you have a kind of influence of far-right ideas among the French people voters. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nikola, for your wonderful presentation. We've learned a lot, and let me ask you a question, and I invite all participants of today's seminar to pose their questions as well. But let me abuse my position of a moderator of this discussion and ask the following question. You've talked very informally, you've provided a lot of information about Zemmour, wild card of these elections, but could you tell us more about his economic ideas, economic philosophy, economic ideology, if there is any? Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So this is a very good question. Why? Because, for instance, you know that we had a French president who was in the left wing in France. That is to know. That is to say, we had we had Mitterrand, who was precisely our president in the 80s, and so Mitterrand was precisely president in the how can I say, in his early ideas. He was not in favor of the market, the capital market. He was not in favor of capitalism. Okay, he was in favor of a kind of social system which provides a lot of services towards people, about education, about health, about a kind of state intervention in economics. So that's why he wanted to implement, how can I say, a kind of Keynesian political Keynesian political ideas. But then he gradually turned, François Mitterrand gradually turned to a kind of liberal approach. Okay, so François Mitterrand, as being a president in the left wing, wanted to implement a kind of social democracy. That is to say, a liberal. He wanted to implement some liberal ideas. So that's why you had a lot of people in the left wing who were very disappointed towards François Mitterrand. They wanted some, they considered that he was going away from the traditional ideas in the left wing. But also, you can see that, for instance, in the left wing nowadays, you have, for instance, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who wants, who has, how can I say, he has a very traditional socialist approach of the economic system in France. He wants some state a lot of state interventions in economics. He wants to make some banks public. He wants to make them to make these banks state banks. He wants to this intervention in economics in order to reduce all of the inequalities between people, and also to increase the minimum average, the minimum income in France. You have also some left candidates who are more or less from in favor of social democracy. So it means that they want a kind of state intervention, but they are still in favor of the market. They are still in favor of the capital market, I would say. And in the wing, in the right wing, you have some differences, especially between Marine Le Pen and Éric Zemmour. Marine Le Pen is more or less for a state, not more or less, she is in favor of a state intervention. She wants to implement some social politics, economic politics in favor of people, for the unemployed people, for the poor people, and so on. But Éric Zemmour, we could say that is a kind of liberal candidate in the far right wing. So for sure, there are some differences from an economic perspective between all of these candidates. But what should I say is that these economic issues, for sure, they are important for people, for the French people now. But they seem to be in the second plan, I should say, in all of these debates. When you look at what's going on in the debates at the televisions, you can see that the first issue all the time is immigration. And then for sure you have some economic aspects, you have some economic debates. But the first one issue discussed is the immigration theme. So I don't know if I replied to your questions, but I hope that this is the case.
Yeah, thank you. Very informative. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Okay. Let me ask one more question. Mm-hmm. During last election, I think Mélenchon was featuring quite prominently, and he gained a significant share of votes. But during this election, he does not appear to be a major player, major contender. What's happened over these years? There were these yellow vests movements, kind of social protests. So he has not been able to capitalize on that movement and channel it towards support of his own position.
I think this is a very good question, because as you have said very fairly, this candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon could have capitalized about all of these social movements as the Gilets jaunes and so on, but that's not the case. That's not the case, and some of the reasons that we could suggest, but this is only some ideas, hypothetical ideas, is that some of these people coming from working classes, from poor classes, I would say, seem to be also disappointed by the very far left positions from Jean-Luc Mélenchon, especially about all of the cultural positions he has, as, for instance, about immigration, about a lot of aspects, but especially about immigration, because as you can know, you have a lot of people coming from the working classes who are more likely to vote for some far-right parties. But I think also that among the voters for Jean-Luc Mélenchon, I'm not sure of this idea, you had a lot of young people. And these young people, I think, they feel that the political current system, the current political system is not going to obtain what they are looking for. So that's why I think that he is going to decrease Jean-Luc Mélenchon. And you're right when you say that he had a very big rise during the last elections, but I think it was a kind of epiphenomenon. That is to say, it's not going to occur once again. But you are right, because we can suggest a lot of reasons, and this is not very understandable as regards the social situation in France.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay, Nikola, thanks a lot for wonderful presentation.
You're welcome. I'm sorry for my English level, because as you know, I'm currently in Ukraine, and I'm all the time speaking in Russian. Unfortunately, because I don't know Ukrainian yet, so that's why it was very complicated for me to switch to English. But I think
you've done great, and you've done great. Thank you, and we are really grateful to you for your presentation, because the interesting thing is that in Ukraine, well, a lot of people follow politics in English-speaking countries, mostly in the United States, sometimes in Great Britain, but we are much less familiar with continental politics, France in particular, and it's a country with a very long influential traditional political thought, pioneering country in many respects as far as its political developments, political revolutions, political breakthroughs are concerned. So it's been extremely enlightening, and I'm also sure that it's been extremely useful for us. So thanks again, and I hope that was your first lecture to our community.
Great pleasure for me to speak with you.
But definitely not the last one. Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot.
I think it will be not the last one, and I hope that this pandemic situation is going to decrease, and that the pandemic the health conditions will let us be able to meet in reality, I would say.
Yes, that will be great.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Great.
Thank you, everybody. And we are going to post this video on our webpage. So follow our social media.
Great.
We will announce that. And we'll see you again soon.
Yes, with pleasure. Дуже дякую. До побачення.
Дякую вам. Всім дякую за участь. І до нових зустрічей онлайн. І сподіваємося, незабаром офлайн. На все добре, всього найкращого.
На все добре, всім дякую.
Дякуємо.
До побачення.
До побачення.
Дякую, до побачення.